So what is it that you lost? Undnar, now equipped with another plate of potato hash with skeever gravy and garlic bread, motioned, "Wait," with his fork, drained half of his second mug of ale, pointed the fork at Sero, who was still adding unnecessary structural integrity to the wall, and, finally, waved at one of the freshly vacated chairs. The arrival of the Thalmor had scattered about half of the patrons. "Grubbin, shit. Grab one and come sit," Vera translated after staring uncomprehendingly for a few blinks, though grubbin, shit was a serviceable description of the general state of affairs, too. Demon Chops went off to retrieve the chair, angled it such that he could still watch the room, plonked down, one ankle over a knee, and extracted his satchel of smoking mixture. Since it was looking like they were going to be in the tavern for a while, Vera caught Frabby's gaze and mouthed, "Miriam tea," then snatched a bread roll. "You never know when your next meal might be, and all that. Well, lass, this is where I must disabuse you of your mistaken notion." Undnar passed his hand over his beard, flicking the bits of food thus collected onto the floor. "I'm not looking for something I lost. As I said, I'm looking for something I misplaced." Vera raised an eyebrow. "Is there some fine nuance I'm missing here?" She hadn't pegged Undnar for the punctilious sort. The Nord belched, tapping his chest to dislodge the trapped air bubble before tearing off a piece of bread to chase around the leftover gravy. "Of course, there's a difference. It's misplaced. Which means, pay attention now, it's in the word itself, that it's missing from the place where it should be." "And what place is that?" Perfunctory question at that point. Vera had a pretty good idea where this was going. "Why, in my possession, of course." Fucker, Vera thought, and stuffed bread into her mouth, in case she got a bit too tempted to tell the Nord what she thought of his linguistic acrobatics. She should have known this was one of those grave-robbing scenarios. What else would this Nord, with his Dunmer merc in tow, want from a local guide? There were plenty of old barrows. 2 smaller ones Vera had even explored in search of grave tar for Undnar. The Altmer had warned her that the local Nord dead were of the restless variety. The barrows, as far as she could tell, were designed to keep the dearly undeparted from running around the countryside. "Keep to the entrance areas," Lavinar had admonished, "and do not disturb the armored corpses." Then, there was the process of scraping off grave tar, black resinous gunk used, she guessed, for preserving the mummies, from the places where it accumulated, mostly in the hollows, such as armpits, mouth, and groin area. Not particularly pleasant work. Frabby brought tea, and Vera leaned back in her chair, warming her hands on the mug cradled between her palms. The Nord was in no hurry to elaborate, probably waiting for her to ask for clarifications. He had moved on from stuffing his stomach to stuffing his pipe. If they were grave robbers, then perhaps this played out in her favor in the end. She would point out the barrels' locations. She could even take them as far as the entrance. And then they could go crawl around in the tunnels to their heart's content, and she'd mind the camp outside. 500 septims, Bothela had said, even if Undnar. The Mad and Demon Chops didn't make it out, she'd still be left with almost a third of the full bribe. Right. No skin off her back. The itchy feeling at the base of her nape made her glance up. She had drifted off into her thoughts. The Dunmer was watching her with a mixture of amused curiosity and speculation, likely waiting to see how she would react to his employer's semantic gymnastics. "So," she took another sip of tea, "I take it you're looking for someone to help you loot." "Loot?" Undnar puffed up like an amorous pigeon. "I am no vulgar looter, Snowberry. Doesn't take much skill to do that. No, but first things first." He unclipped the leather purse from his belt and slammed it on the table, narrowly missing his plate. "It's all there. It's all there. 150 up front. I am a man of principles, lass. Bringing in a new partner ain't shoving coins down a wench's blouse. There are risks involved. We'll do this right." Vera eyed him dubiously. How did Demon Chops put up with this troll? Probably because they were cut from the same less than upstanding cloth, was how. In my experience, shoving coins where they're not wanted is always risky business. Minimally, you'll lose the coins, with nothing to show for it but your bruised pride. The Nord's laughter boomed through the tavern, collecting a few curious glances. Firebrand, aren't you? I like you, Snowberry. Are you saying you don't want the money? I'm saying jingling some coins in my face isn't going to make me take a deal when I don't know what I'm walking into. You still haven't explained what it is that you've misplaced. Fine, Undnar relented. Smart girl. Teldrin, you still have that map? Let's not keep the lady in the dark, Give it a moment, I'll explain. You can count the coins in the meantime. Vera pointedly ignored the satchel in front of her. The drawstring had come loose, and the gold inside caught the firelight. The septims looked exceptionally clean, as if someone had spent time polishing them. Sero blew smoke out the side of his mouth, pinched his lips over his roll-up to free up his hands, and went rummaging in his pack. He extracted a folded note, crumpled and stained with grease, and passed it to Undnar. Anything else? A perfect melange of derisive and deferent. No matter how much he liked coin, the merc didn't exactly seem to enjoy being ordered around. Vera glanced at the note. In addition to the other damage, it had a very suspicious brown stain along the edge. She hoped it was just dry blood. Either way, she wasn't going to touch that thing with a 10-foot pole. Undnar pushed his plate to the side and smoothed out the paper on the table between them. And there you have it. That moment in the old sagas when our fearless adventurers pore over a mysterious map that will lead them to their destiny, he declaimed, a gleeful twinkle in his eyes. Behold, Snowberry, the map. We were hoping you'd start by helping us make sense of it. Vera cocked her head to one side. That didn't help, so she cocked it the other way. Not an improvement. You call that a map? She was genuinely curious. Looks like a map to me, Sero drawled. What would you call it, Outlander? Vera glanced at the merc. I'd call it a doodle, but I could be swayed into amending it to scribble if you're persuasive. As a map, if that's what it is, it's unusable, though I suppose you could wipe your ass with it in a pinch. Damn it, even in this place, there should be some standards for what passed for cartography. Not to your liking? Something dark flashed under the layer of raspy sarcasm. Vera didn't think his face could do soft even if he tried it. No wonder he'd gone into hiring out his sword arm. He certainly looked the part. Should have asked the fetcher to apply himself, I suppose. He dragged on his rollie, holding the smoke in before blowing it out in a quick hiss. Pity I slit his throat first then. And now, there was an unmistakable warning in his voice, lazy drawl notwithstanding. Vera tensed. Her bow was unstrung. Not that a hunting bow did you much good in a close fight, as she wouldn't reach her dagger in time, not against the mercs. Undnar looked like he'd be slower, master velocity and all that, but the Dunmer was all coiled compact energy. Sero, you keep trying to intimidate the lass, and I'll dock your pay. Now, Snowberry, before you bring the guards down on us. Undnar patted the diagram. We lifted this off a bandit. Didn't go searching for trouble either. But there we were, walking, just minding our manners, and there they were, and, well, you can imagine the rest. Vera breathed out, forcing the tension to drain from her muscles. Her mind had conjured up a rather different scenario. She took a sip of tea, sloshed the liquid around, focusing on the heat. We're not our history. No, Dima, love, we are our history. Something about what she said had hit a nerve with demon chops, and he had lashed out, or rather, showed his teeth. She filed it away, forcing herself to look at the Dunmer, face open, serious. Nothing wrong with killing bandits. Easy there, asshole. I'm not your enemy. Just stopped commissioning them for drawing you maps, yeah? She got herself a chuckle for that one. Slight surprise, oversized pupils widening, then a shift, his shoulders easing. He took another drag, blew smoke to the rafters, a perfect ring drifting into a distended oval. If you have better candidates in mind, I'm all ears. Point is, lass, we need you to help us decipher this less than satisfactory doodle, as you said. We know it's a map, and we need to get to wherever it's pointing. Undnar had shed his jovial dumbass act. For a moment, he looked almost grave, but then Frabbi brought him another ale, and the happy buffoon mask came back on. Vera leaned forward, examining the lines of the drawing. Now that she was focusing on it, the sketch wasn't so nonsensical, but you couldn't draw a map if you kept yourself on the ground. Your mind had to take wing. This wouldn't tell them the distance, just the vantage point of where the doodler had stood. All right. That right here? She tapped the squiggle, vaguely reminiscent of an anvil. Could be the Zenithar shrine, and if so, then that here looks like it's the peak northeast of the island with the old temple. She glanced at Undnar to see if he was following. Crickets. They really didn't know the area. All right then. That dotted line, I'm guessing, means you have to go around it. And this looks like... Her lips went numb. Oh, shit. Undnar's bushy eyebrows lifted in question. What is it, lass? Vera leaned back, crossing her arms over her chest. Not for all the coin in Skyrim. She wasn't. That's Red Eagle Redoubt. This time, the look Undnar gave her wasn't so blank, but he hid it well, washing down the flash of recognition with more ale. Vera turned to the Dunmer, one of the largest Forsworn camps this side of Markarth. Demon Chop quirked an eyebrow, the corner of his mouth hitching up. I'll remember to be suitably impressed. Can you take us there, girl? Vera forced her shoulders into a shrug. No. Undnar and Sero exchanged a look. I'm not going anywhere near that place, but I'll bring you close enough, and then you're on your own. Not her funeral. No skin off her back. She pulled out her own map, unfolding it over her knees since the table was stained and crowded with empty dishes. Undnar squinted at the drawing after attempting, and failing, to move his chair. What's this then? That's a proper map. Looks like doodles to me, lass. No offense, just more of them. The Dunmer leaned forward, his eyes tracking across the paper. What are those concentric lines? Vera looked up, nodding. Not a bad question. Not a bad question. Elevation. And these numbers here? He tapped an elongated dark gray fingernail against the legend. The merc had nice hands, Vera thought suddenly. Long, strong fingers with clearly defined joints. Pale scar across 3 knuckles on the left one. She peeled her eyes away, refocusing. That's my own notes, mostly idiosyncratic stuff. Won't be that useful to you. Sero seemed curious, though, and she didn't see any harm in elaborating. I keep a record of how long it takes me to get places, depending on the season and the weather. I see. What about the overlay right here? The side of his hand brushed against her wrist as he reached around. Surely not doodles. Vera chuckled and tried to ignore the way her skin tingled at the brief contact. The merc ran hot. At this distance, she could feel the heat coming off him, presumably a difference in base bodily temperature, since he didn't look fevered. Some species adaptation, perhaps. These marks are where I've spotted large predators. Square for bear, circle for saber cat, crosses for wolves. She tapped her finger next to where he was pointing. See? This cave here used to just have skeevers. About 3 months ago, a she-bear moved in with 2 cubs. The younger one died. Wolfpack got to him. So she's gone a bit touchy. So while this road here shows up on the maps you might buy in the market, it's no good for a lone traveler. And what are these? Ah, right. That was her, using her own world's alphabet. Fortunately, just the first letter, not a full word, and thus plausibly deniable. Just a personal cipher for marking resources. Distract him.
Say, if I want to pick up some skeever hides.
She traced a line to a spot southwest of the bear cave. I would go right around here. There's a farm about a mile upriver, and their garbage washes up along this shallow bend here, so the skeevers have gotten nice and fat. I'm expecting the current to change once we're over the spring melt, so they'll probably migrate in another month. Clever, Sero trailed, looking up from the map to meet her gaze. I am starting to see your point about the bandits. Ahem. Artwork. Vera nodded, irrationally pleased at the praise, before stuffing the unwelcome emotions back where they came from. Then again, fuck it. This was something she was good at. If that made Demon Chops less likely to embark on his "we're mean, lean, killing machines little girl" routine, all the better. See, Teldrin, I told you she'd be useful. Undnar was beaming at her like a proud parent. I can smell these things, I'm telling you. Hold your horses. Vera held her pinky against her mark for the Forsworn encampment and pressed her thumb to the spot where the river crooked around the cliffs. There's a little path the rams use to get to the water on that side. The cliffs there are steep, but it's the shortest way to the redoubt if you don't want to trek all the way around to the northern part. The cliffs will give some higher ground if you want to pick them off at long range. The other side, you're both downhill and upwind from them. She looked up. I'll take you all the way to the foot of this cliff, to where the path starts, but no further. I'll wait for a day for you two to get back. I'll have healing potions and bandages if you come back banged up. After a day, if you're still not back, I'll head back to Markarth. What if the Forsworn capture us, lass? Won't you sweep in to the rescue? Undnar approximated heartbroken chagrin, not very convincingly. What if they do unspeakable things to our remains? Vera blew a raspberry. The Nord guffawed, slapping his knee. Your remains won't care, one way or another. I'll make an offering to RK on your behalf, if you'd like. She turned to the Dunmer. Any funerary rites I should know about. Whom should I beseech on your account, if it comes to that? She had meant it as a joke, but something bitter passed in the Dunmer's eyes. He stuffed it down quickly. Won't matter a whit, Outlander. Not at this stage. Vera shrugged. Fine with me. She opened the purse and counted the coins. Weiss. What are we looking for anyway? Undnar smiled broadly. Why, a sword, of course. Vera nodded. Not her problem. Up to the foot of the cliffs. No further. She left her 150 septims with Bothala before meeting the duo at the city gates. Traveling with them turned out to be oddly easy. The Nord and the Dunmer had an efficient routine, established over what Vera was guessing were months, if not years, of joint travel. And while they were clearly unfamiliar with the area, they didn't make stupid mistakes. She hunted but outsourced dressing the kills to Sero, who turned out better at it. Frankly, Undnar didn't do shit except for tending the campfire and eating the food they cooked, and Vera was more than happy to be left to her own devices, trapping fowl and supplementing their meals with small game and whatever she could forage, mostly early greens, tender and juicy and sweet with spring sap. The summer Vera arrived had been arid, gold dry grass and powdery dust gilting the sun-warmed summits. Even if this year proved more rainy, there would still be a period of scarcity right around mid-year, and then the berries would start coming in, and the mushrooms after that. Then, starchy roots, fat from the warm months of soaking up sunlight and storing it as sugar. Undnar was his usual self on the road. No personality change there. The same loud, rude, irreverent humor, a goofy bear of a man, and as deceptively good-natured. The Dunmer, for his part, eased off his sardonic, growled half-threats after that moment in the tavern when something had passed between them over the map. Or before that, maybe, when Vera saw his snarling for what it was, and he saw her noticing. Recognition mirrored back, as if, in that moment, The languages their respective lives had left them with converged into some shared meaning. Demon Chops was abrasive, but he wasn't stupid or unobservant. Either way, whatever was growing there instead wasn't comfortable. Vera made sure she never had her back turned to either of the men, but it had settled into a kind of grudging camaraderie born of tired feet and shared fires, a pinched feeling, sore and almost sweet, that tugged at some long-buried heartstring, familiar, like plugging herself into a well-oiled mechanism. Once upon a time, Vera had been a part of something just like it, bigger, when everyone was still alive. Split City was held together through circuits of constant migration, on a kind of rotating schedule of flight and foraging, a careful choreography of divided tasks, once there was enough of them to share the labor. A long time ago, the cities of her world had been sedentary. Before ending up in Markarth, Vera couldn't have imagined it. How would you survive? Resources were always thin, but after the Citadel raided them in '89, there was barely anything left to scavenge, so you had to stay on the move. Jules had broached the topic first, or maybe Saeed. The memory had grown fuzzy around the edges, like a heat mirage. Not that it mattered. They talked about heading west, going towards what had once been Lake Huron. Used to be cottage country, Jules had explained. His great-great-grandparents were from those parts. Boats and farms and quaint little houses, most of them decomposing ruins, but no gangs. Or, well, fewer anyway. Martha and Vera had been hesitant. Ced had thrown his support behind Jules, and not just because he and Jules were lovers either. Ced, soft-eyed, with the scar across his mouth like a fishhook. The strategist of their group. 2 steps ahead, just quieter about it. Dima had been against it, categorically, but, in the end, he was outnumbered. It was ironic, in the end, which of them ended up implementing the plan. For several years, it was just a hypothetical, something that tied their group together as much as their other bonds did. A joint cause, the imaginary of a possible future. Vera shrugged her hungry ghosts aside, turned her face to the sky, the setting sun warm on her skin. The breeze carried the tang of warm juniper and the crisp coolness of snowmelt. A lovely smell. Point was, it had been easy to fall into a rhythm with her 2 oddball companions, which was probably why she had allowed her guard to slip. No. Absolutely. No. Vera stared in horror at the pieces of armor. The term was a vast overstatement that Undnar was carefully laying out on the grass in front of her. It had taken them about a week to get to their intended destination. Largely without a hitch. She should have known something like this would happen. It had all proceeded way too smoothly. Her eyes darted to Teldrin, not that she expected to find much support from those quarters. The Dunmer was pinching the bridge of his nose with the air of someone who grasped fully the futility of trying to dissuade the mad Nord from his chosen course of action. I am not putting this on, Undnar. No, 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 no. I mean, why? What do you mean, why, lass? I thought it was obvious. We need that sword. The Forsworn have said sword in their possession. There is how many, Teldrin? 26. The last time I con. 26 Forsworn and 3 of us. Surely you can see how that's a problem. Vera glared at him mutely before gesturing with both hands at the armor. Actually, there are 26 Forsworn and 2 of you, since I'm not going. And I definitely don't see how this outfit here will solve the mathematical challenge you're facing. Undnar grinned like a hungry troll spotting a ram. Way I figure it, same rules apply, lass. You don't have to come anywhere near the encampment proper. All we need is to get past the sentries, so they don't turn us into target practice before we've even set foot into the camp, which is where you come in, Snowberry. You're going to sneak us in. Time to earn your keep, eh? Vera tried, and failed, not to sputter in entirely justified outrage. Undnar patted the armor on the ground. As your prisoners. She opened her mouth, and then closed it with an audible clack. I She gestured to herself, in case the referent was unclear. Took you. She gestured at Undnar, and then, belatedly, included demon chops. As prisoners. Forsworn women are very fierce, I hear. Savage. Feral even. Deadly opponents in combat. Setting aside the fact that I am not going anywhere. I am not a Forsworn woman. They'll be able to spot the subterfuge a mile away. I don't move like them. I don't speak like them. Do you seriously think they won't be able to tell? Undnar shrugged, not the least bit discouraged. You're Breton. Put on the outfit. Add a bit of face paint to make you look fiercer. Nord, you are almost twice my size, and probably about 3 times my weight. And she pointed an angry finger at Sero, who wasn't doing shit to stop this disaster from toddling off a cliff. Looks like he could fillet me in his sleep. Demon Chops offered her a slight bow. I would make sure I was awake for the occasion, if that helps. Asshole. Undnar scratched his head, meditating on this unexpected hurdle. You might have a point there, Snowberry. We'll have to really make sure the face paint is convincing. Children will help you with that, eh? The merc had the decency to groan. I don't recall face painting being part of my contract with you, Undnar. You hear this, Snowberry? Undnar rubbed his beard in aggrieved contemplation. See what I must contend with. This lout gets to muck around in mud or ash or whatever it is those Forsworn used to decorate themselves with, and then he gets to put his grubby paws all over a pretty Breton lass. But no, not good enough. He wants me to pay him extra for it. As a matter of fact, Sero interjected, I don't recall my grubby paws being included in your new associate's contract either. He turned to Vera, his red eyes glinting in the semi-darkness. If you want my advice, Outlander, I suggest we both ask for more gold. We could split it later, if you're interested. Divines. Lo, this treachery. They are uniting against me, the unconscionable scoundrels. Undnar wailed at the night sky, brandishing both hands as if to call upon them the wrath of heaven. Be quiet, you madman. Vera shushed at him aggressively. You're going to bring the Forsworn down upon us. How had she gotten herself into this mess and this completely insane conversation? Why was she even discussing the armor? Nothing remotely like this was part of her original agreement with the Nord, though Undnar seemed to have a fondness for reinterpreting the terms of a contract in new and creative ways. Still, if these two wanted to charge a Forsworn camp all by their lonesome and become the Hagraven's playthings, that was certainly not her responsibility. She promised to wait a day, and she'd keep the promise, but anything else was not going to be her problem. Except, of course, it didn't quite work that way in practice. 26 to 2 wasn't just terrible odds. It was a suicide mission. They weren't walking out of there. Minimally, bickering in circles was delaying the inevitable. If we don't make it out, lass, then I can't pay you your full amount on account of being dead and all that. Undnar tried, approaching the problem from the now very familiar pecuniary direction. I've got it. He slapped his knee in time with the new, no doubt incrementally worse, idea. You didn't best us in fair combat. Cunning and treacherous snake that you Forsworn women are. You overcame us with your feminine wiles. Vera blinked. What, both? Well, not at the same time. The mad Nord amended, before turning to Sero with an inquisitive look. Right. Or at the same time? The Dunmer rubbed his forehead, with the air of someone trying to ward off a migraine, and growled something about Mafala. I don't care how much you're paying me, Undnar. I'm not answering that. Bah. The Nord grinned. Spoil sport. Look, lass, if they see our hands are bound, it won't matter. They're not going to ask the hows and the whys and the how comes. You just need to march us in there like you mean it, and then we'll take care of the rest. He squinted slyly. I'll raise your pay. 300 septims on the other end. How about it? Still no. She crossed her arms over her chest, as if that could protect her from the Nord's unbelievable pushiness and harebrained ideas. 400. Sero coughed into his fist. Yeah. And once the Forsworn resurrect my corpse, it can go shamble off and put that coin to good use by erecting a shrine to my stupidity. No fucking way. No, Undnar. Vera took a deep breath. Why don't you two don a disguise then? Just, she pointed her chin at the obnoxious piece of armor, wherever you found this set. And don't tell me, because I don't want to know. I'm sure you could have lifted another one off a male Forsworn. Undnar heaved a despondent sigh, the sort of sigh that was meant to demonstrate how much of a paragon of patience he was being. Well, lass, they're mostly Breton. No offense, but you lot are itty-bitty. He demonstrated just how itty-bitty Bretons were by holding his thumb and forefinger about an inch apart, squinting at it with one eye. Besides, that armor doesn't cover much, if you catch my meaning. I'm just too big and he squinted, too blue, or gray. Which is it, Sero? It's irrelevant, for starters. The Dunmer wrapped an oilcloth around the whetstone he had been using to hone his blade and shoved the bundle into the pack at his feet. We are wasting time. As I recall, the deal took us only as far as the bottom of the path. He pointed the business end of his blade at Vera, the dark, intricately carved metal catching the firelight. She made good on that. There is a long fissure atop the plateau about 60 paces south of where you'll come up. I've never used it myself, but you can see it from that cliff on the other side of the river. Vera pointed her thumb over his shoulder. It'll give you cover until the towers. Teldrin met her gaze and nodded. My thanks. A trace of a smile touched his lip, the tracework of his tattoo drawing her attention to the asymmetry of his smirk. There was a kind of spare minimalism to him, now that her eyes had gotten used to his odd high-contrast coloring. Not so much arresting anymore, as almost peaceful. The sort of aesthetics that didn't clamor for your constant attention with being insistently pretty. Vera dragged her gaze from the Dunmer and returned the bow she had set aside earlier in favor of trying to wave the horrid armor away back into her lap. It was already restrung, so she busied herself with rubbing tallow into the wood to keep it waterproof. Not a task that needed to be done right this moment, but it would have to be done eventually anyway. She was drawing this out. Stupid. Just rip off the Band-Aid. Another theatrical sigh from the buffoon-in-chief. You're really not going to help us, lass. No. She looked up, trying to break through the Nord's clowning to whatever was beneath it. Look, it's an unnecessary risk. It makes no strategic sense. Yeah, it's flashy. And marginally clever if you can pull it off, maybe. But I'm telling you, we won't pull it off. They'll know I'm not one of them, the same way I'd know you two are not from the Reach, even if I didn't know you from Adam. Who is this Adam you speak of, lass? Vera waved it off. A prat. From what I hear, it's not the point. I won't improve your chances by irritating the Forsworn with costuming. Just, either way, it's not a good idea. Can't you find another sword? There's not, exactly, a deficit from what I can tell. Undnar shook his head. Wish that we could, but no. It has to be this one. Well. He stretched, and then placed his axe ceremoniously on the ground before him, giving the weapon a few loving pats. Since you think we're as good as dead, Sero and I, won't you do an old dying warrior a final favor and at least try the outfit? Vera threw a pebble at his head, which Undnar dodged. I'm not here to fulfill sordid Nord fantasies about mountain savages. What about sordid Dunmer fantasies? Will those do you better? The Nord turned to the mark. Want to share one of those before we go? Not for all the gold in Skyrim. What happened to your sense of humor, you joyless mud crab? Unless you think I can dispatch the Forsworn with barbs, I suggest we get going. It'll be dawn soon. I'd rather not tangle with them in broad daylight. The demented Nord switched tactics again, drawing himself up and bristling with false outrage. What of our other arrangement, lass? Would you abandon your future husband in his time of need? I demand deference from my bride-to-be. He pounded his fist on his knee. Yeah, well, as your future widow, I suggest you take your demands and shove them, unless you want to first bequeath all your possessions to me, in written form. The Dunmer emitted a sound that sounded suspiciously like a choked snort. When Vera glanced his way, he was shaking his head, his hand over his eyes. Well. Undnar scratched his beard and thought, you got a point there. Idiots. Vera sighed, glanced at the Dunmer, and motioned at his tobacco pouch. Roll me one, will ya? He cocked an eyebrow. I didn't realize you smoked. This might be a titch. Strong. I'll survive. As you wish. She wasn't sure what he was using in lieu of paper. Some very thin, gossamer-like material that put her in mind of dragonfly wings, but more supple. Or perhaps the gills of a mushroom. She found her gaze lingering on him when he was sealing the roll-up. A quick swipe of his tongue, efficient, then a practiced flick of his fingers as he tightened the cigarette. He caught her looking and smirked. Light? Vera drew back as a tiny flame swelled between his thumb and forefinger. She lit up awkwardly, drew the smoke deep into her lungs, rolling it around her mouth before blowing it out through her nose. The mixture was smooth, a bit minty. Whatever the active ingredient was, it wasn't nicotine. Some other chemical, sharper, with a faster edge. Any final directions from either of you? The Nord's ribald mask was flaking off quickly, revealing the alarming glint of nascent battle fury. As a matter of fact, Vera watched him warily as he unhooked the amulet from around his neck before tossing it in her lap. Hold on to that until I'm back, will you? It's meant for a very special lady. Wouldn't want the Hagravens to get the wrong idea. The thing was, they probably were going to die, all things considered. She ignored the sudden pang of sadness. What about you, Dunmer? Last directives? His eyes drifted to the skies, and then he grinned, all sharp edges and white teeth, and crooked a finger at her. How about a personal question? Won't matter if we don't make it, will it? Undnar scowled, pantomiming displeasure. Pause to yourself, sellsword. Sellsword.
I don't pay you for that. Oh.
Now he worries about the terms. Vera scooted closer to where Demon Chops was sitting. He hadn't been particularly interested in personal details before, which suited her perfectly fine, except that now she was curious. He leaned down, close enough that she could feel his breath tickling her ear. He smelled like he looked. A sharp, slightly spicy scent, with a hint of mineral heat. Abrupt, but not unpleasant. Well? Vera asked, suddenly acutely aware of her own skin. Where are you really from, Outlander? He whispered, and then he straightened and busied himself with his blade. Vera got to her feet, turned away to look at the dark water of the river. Some large nocturnal bird flew above, briefly shading Master's pale glow with its wingspan. If you come back alive, I'll tell you, she said to the water. A safe bet. She didn't watch them leave, busying herself with tending to the fire instead.